Am I having a hallucination?
Hi, Emily.
You also know her?
We were at Runway at the same time, Miranda.
Really? Where was I?
There are certain moments in pop culture that don't just trend. They shift the atmosphere. And on February 2nd, while everyone else was busy talking about football, music awards, or a groundhog predicting the weather, something far more important quietly happened. The first trailer for The Devil Wears Prada dropped, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this. I felt it. It's been 20 years, 2 decades since Miranda Priestly last walked into a room and owned it without raising her voice. 2 decades since Andy Sachs stepped into Runway wearing the wrong sweater and walked out a different person. So when I pressed play on that trailer the second it hit YouTube, I wasn't just watching a sequel preview. I was testing whether lightning could strike twice. And I have to admit something. It might. All 4 of the original leads are back. Meryl Streep as Miranda Priestly, Anne Hathaway as Andrea Sachs, Emily Blunt as Emily, Stanley Tucci as Nigel. And what's wild is that when the first film came out, only Streep carried the Academy Award prestige label. Now they're all Oscar winners or nominees. The evolution isn't just in the characters, it's in the cast itself. But let me be honest, when this sequel was first announced, I was skeptical. Not cautious, skeptical. Sequels to cultural classics almost never survive the weight of expectations. And when you're dealing with a film that shaped fashion culture, workplace satire, and even career ambition for an entire generation, you better have a reason to come back. The only thing that gave me hope early on, Meryl Streep. She famously avoids sequels, so if she signed on, I knew there had to be something in that script worth revisiting Runway for. Then the trailer hit, and I genuinely wasn't prepared for how good it looked. My biggest fear was that they'd go the safe route. Nostalgia bait, recycled story beats, Miranda being cold again, Andy being insecure again. The same arc, different year. But from what I'm seeing so far, this story feels grounded in something real. There's a moment in the trailer where Miranda seemingly doesn't recognize Andy, or pretends not to, and I laughed out loud, because if that's an act, it's genius. If it's real, it's even more brutal. That one interaction already tells me this movie understands its characters. And then there's Andy returning to Runway, now stepping into an editor role. That shift alone changes the entire power dynamic. Watching someone who once survived a toxic system potentially become part of its leadership, that's layered, that's complicated, that's interesting. I'm also fascinated by how much of the real world might bleed into this narrative. Miranda Priestly was famously inspired by Anna Wintour, the longtime Vogue editor who recently stepped down from her role. The first film lightly played with that parallel. This sequel has an opportunity to fully lean into it. What happens to legacy media leaders in a world that's shifting faster than they can control? Because here's the real difference between 2006 and now. Social media. The fashion industry today doesn't just live in glossy magazines. It lives on TikTok. It lives on Instagram. It lives in viral trend cycles that burn out in 48 hours. So watching Runway attempt to survive in a hyper-digital ecosystem is actually a brilliant angle. Instead of simply rehashing office politics, this sequel has the potential to explore what it means to remain relevant in an algorithm-driven culture. And let's talk about the cast expansion. Tracy Thoms is back as Lily. Tiber Feldman returns as Irv Ravitz. But the new additions are what really caught my attention. Patrick Brammall is reportedly playing Andy's new romantic interest. And I'm just going to say it. I was never a fan of her college boyfriend in the original. If you were either, I think we're not alone on that one. So this change already feels like a correction. Simone Ashley joining the cast? Inspired. Even without knowing her role, she brings a modern energy that fits perfectly into the fashion meets digital world concept. Sydney Sweeney was a surprise addition, especially considering the recent controversies surrounding her public image. But if I'm being objective, she absolutely fits inside the high-gloss, hyper-ambitious aesthetic this franchise thrives on. The real question isn't whether she belongs, it's how large her role will be. And then the cameos. Donatella Versace, Lady Gaga. Even if they're brief appearances as themselves, it signals something important. This film isn't playing small. It's aiming for spectacle again. The first movie had that wow factor because it felt plugged into the real fashion world. Bringing in icons like this reinforces that ambition. Now, here's where things get interesting. When paparazzi photos and early promo clips surfaced online, the internet wasn't kind. People criticized the lighting, the wardrobe, Miranda's styling choices. Some even claimed the film looked outdated before it was finished. I'll admit, at first, I agreed. The fluorescent lighting felt harsh. Miranda's outfits looked more 2010 than 2026. I caught myself thinking, how could a franchise that once defined fashion suddenly feel behind the curve? But after seeing the official trailer in context, I realized something. There's more beneath the surface. The exaggerated brightness might not be accidental. It could be commentary. The original film used visual contrast to reflect emotional tone. This sequel seems to be doing the same. Andy still looks tense. Nigel and Emily still deliver razor-sharp sarcasm. Miranda still controls a room with silence. The DNA is intact. And unlike some recent sequels that simply recreate old storylines, this one appears to be pushing forward. It's not Andy surviving a hostile workplace again. It's Andy navigating a transformed industry. It's legacy media fighting algorithm culture. It's power structures adjusting to digital influence. That's not repetitive. That's evolution. We still don't know the full central conflict. And honestly, that mystery makes it even more exciting. The trailer gives us tone, tension, and character shifts, but it's holding back the true narrative core, which is smart marketing. And yes, I've seen the leaked TikTok clips from New York sets. I know another iconic fashion montage is coming. I know the city itself will once again feel like a character, and that alone is enough to carry my anticipation. Here's my confession. I'm genuinely excited. Not ironically. Not cautiously, genuinely. The Devil Wears Prada left a permanent cultural imprint. It shaped how we viewed ambition, mentorship, sacrifice, and the cost of success. This sequel doesn't just have nostalgia on its side, it has relevance. Will it restore faith in sequels as a whole? I don't have a crystal ball, but in a chaotic, fast-paced world where everything feels temporary, there's something strangely comforting about revisiting characters who defined an era. And if Miranda Priestley taught us anything, it's that power never truly disappears. It adapts. The Devil Wears Prada 2 arrives in theaters May 1st, 2026. And when the lights dim in that theater, I won't just be watching a movie. I'll be watching to see whether legacy can survive reinvention. And honestly, that's what makes this sequel matter. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments. This is where these kinds of films come to life. Until the next story, stay curious, be critical, keep your eyes on the screen, and remember, every film you haven't seen is a new film.